Hey there, Chelsea here, MonarchAlley. I am a vintage lover, a thrifter, and a part-time reseller, and today I have a really fun collaboration that I'm doing with the FI resellers. I'm so excited because we talked about a few different ways that we could do a video collaboratively together, and we landed on this topic of timeless vintage items to pass up. That was definitely their idea, and I am 100% here for it because that's the sort of stuff I love talking about and I love picking up. So I think this is going to be a really fun video because I'm excited about these topics, and I think we can both give you some really good advice on vintage items to pick up when you are thrifting. So how this is going to work is that I have chosen 5 topics to cover, and the 5 resellers have chosen the other 5 topics. So to get the full 10, you've got to watch both videos here. So my topics today are going to be Levi's, sweaters, unique kids clothing, mugs, and 90s nostalgia. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about those items, what is selling well, what's selling for high value, what people look for, then stay tuned. And of course, I have to note that, like I said, this is the sort of stuff that I love picking up in my thrift hauls and I love talking about. You'll see a lot of these types of items show up in my What Sold videos. So if this sort of stuff is something you are interested in, please go ahead and subscribe now because you will learn a lot about it on my channel. Also, with each category, this is pretty much going to be a summary. So if you have experience in any of these categories that I'm talking about today, feel free to drop comments below and share your information with the rest of us, and we can all kind of learn and grow together. That's one thing I really love about the reselling and vintage communities is that there are a lot of people with a huge wealth of knowledge, and they're not afraid to share that information. So let's dive into it. My first topic that I'm going to go over is vintage Levi's. There are a lot of people with a lot more information than I have on this topic, but I have some experience. For me, it's often just an experiment, and so I'm playing around with which styles are the most sought after. And for this video, I did a little extra research to find out what's selling right now and at what price points. So in my personal experience, vintage Levi's that are made in USA and the 550 style do really, really well. The pairs that I've sold, whether they were the actual full Levi's or cutoffs that people have cut off and distressed, in later years, have sold usually within a week or two of being listed, which is a huge plus for me. I've also had good luck with the 560s. So the 550 and the 560s are both a relaxed fit, but the 550 has a tapered leg and the 560 has more of a straight leg. So different customers are looking for different styles. I do think the 550 is a little bit trendier. It has more of that mom jeans style, and people really seem to like that. Like I mentioned, the cutoffs have done really well, but I never cut off the jeans that I pick up. I like to sell them just as they are. I'm not going to try to cut them off, do crazy distressing. Although people do still love that style, I just have the hardest time doing that because there are also people out there that just want the jeans as they are, and I have the hardest time making that decision for people. So in both of those styles, you're looking for a high rise. You're looking for that kind of just heavier denim that, I don't know, I feel like I have to say you know it when you see it, you know it when you touch it, but that heavier denim that is pretty much 100% cotton. A lot of jeans now are made with stretchy materials, and this is not what we're looking for, and probably not really what we're going to find when we look at vintage denim, but it's just something to note. If you're unfamiliar, a high rise is pretty much anything like 9-10 inches or above. With these vintage high rise jeans, you're probably going to get a 12-inch rise, which is perfection. People also really love a button fly. And in doing my research, it seems that button fly high rise denim sells usually at a higher price point. So if you find that, that's totally a bonus. That's not something that I've ever had the opportunity to pick up yet. It also looks like people are looking for black denim and light wash denim. In fact, in my personal experience, the black 550s have sold faster and for higher price points than the light wash. But of course, always remember that trends change and people are always looking for different things in different seasons and years even. So be sure to just continue to look up comps until you feel like you have a really firm grasp of vintage Levi's and what people are looking for, what the trends are right now. I think I mentioned it earlier, but another thing to look for when it comes to vintage Levi's are made in USA. That means they're 100% definitely vintage because they stopped producing Levi jeans in the United States in the year, I think 2000. And so if your tag says made in USA, then you can definitely guarantee that they are a vintage pair of jeans. I also look for a paper tag. And again, you kind of know that when you see it and feel it because it's not the kind of satiny, like flimsy tags that they use now. It's a more stiff paper feeling tag. Those are usually good indicators that the jeans are vintage. There's also a way to figure out the date from like the inside tag. There's a series of numbers and you can figure out the date that way. I don't have the information in my brain right now, but I'll try to link to like a video that explains that better. It's also something you can Google of how to date your Levi's. A style of Levi's that I've not had the opportunity to sell, but I need to remember to look out for are 501s. And 501s definitely seem to be doing even better than the 550s, 560s kind of mom jean style. The 501 is just a classic Levi style that people love and cherish and they still want to wear it. So if you happen to find vintage 501s, definitely look those up because some price points are in the $60 and $70 range. That's not a style that I have a lot of info on, but I had to throw it out there because in my research, it seems like they're really desirable and sought after. Of course, I should also note that other vintage denim does really well as well. I just want to talk about Levi's because I love it the best. But I have sold some Liz Claiborne jeans for like the $30 to $40 price range, and I've seen Wranglers do really well as I think Bass and Rustler. So always be on the lookout for that kind of heavier, stiffer vintage denim. Okay, I could not do a video about vintage items that I look for without talking about vintage sweaters. I'm actually wearing one that I have listed right now. It's so soft and comfy, like I feel like I need to just keep it forever. This is kind of in like that Coogie style sweater, which is a brand that is highly sought after, and it has these kind of wavy threaded like knit vibes, except usually I think going more vertical, but they have all kinds of different patterns. Look that up because some of those sweaters do really well. This is not a particularly sought after brand name, but I picked it up because of the style. And like I said, super soft and comfy. It's actually a linen and cotton blend. I love it. It's so comfy. So if you're interested in this, check out my eBay store or Poshmark, or feel free to send me a DM on Instagram or an email. But anyway, enough of the sales pitch. I want to talk about vintage sweaters, what I look for when I'm thrifting and sourcing vintage sweaters, and things you could be on the lookout for. Again, I'm operating a bit off my personal experience, but I also did do like a more recent comp search because it's always important, guys, to learn and grow and don't get stuck in what you sold 2 years ago, but know what is selling right now. So I did some look. It definitely appears that wild, quirky designs, abstract designs like this are still pretty popular. Grandpa sweaters are a key word that people use and a key style that they look for. And vintage sweaters are definitely a timeless, I mean, these things are from the 70s and 80s, early 90s, people are still wanting them now. So they're kind of this timeless, nostalgic look. In fact, really a lot of the vintage items I talk about today, nostalgia and that kind of comfy longing for what you knew before really kind of drives a lot of these purchases. So that's why people refer to these sweaters as grandpa sweaters. When I think about it, like, I don't think like people that are 20 right now, I don't think their grandparents dress the way my grandparents dressed in these grandpa sweaters. So it's funny that they call them grandpa sweaters when I have a feeling that grandmas and grandpas are wearing a much more modern style clothing with less embellishments. It's just funny to me to think about that. Anyway, the style seems to be that people are looking for like cutesy kind of quirky patterns, kind of the more random, the better. I once sold this amazing sweater that had like a swan on it that like went onto the sleeve a little bit, and it had like gold flaking and it was like just this incredible piece. I don't regret selling it, but I miss it a little bit. When it comes to vintage sweaters, people are also generally looking for a bit of an oversized look, similar to what I'm working with today. This is a men's large. I would normally wear like a women's medium, and I love that my hands are like this. I don't know if if you can see, but that the sleeves, I can pull them and like cozy up, and there's room to just be cozy. And that's what a lot of people are looking for when it comes to vintage sweaters. They want that chunky knit, something that looks big and bulky. They want oversized looks. So for me, I still go ahead and list my sweaters in the men's category with the size that they are, even if women might be looking for them. But in my listing, I'll say something about like oversized women's or something like that, just to kind of bring in all audiences. I also saw some cool references to kind of like that old-timey like sailor style, which I really love too. I know people have done really well with like Irish and Scottish brands, and that's like 100% comfy, cozy, warm, the vibe that a lot of people are putting out there. It seems like pullover sweaters do really well, so I do look mostly for those, but some cardigans can also do well. So this is a tough category because what am I saying to you? Is that people are looking for big, weird sweaters? Like, that's way too vague, but I guess the key is to try it out. If it's a category that you are interested in listing, try it out, pick out a few random sweaters, look up the brand. It could be a surprisingly valuable brand. So definitely look that up and give it a go. List it around $25, $30 and see what happens. Or you could try some auctions and see if something gets wild. Of course, I cannot talk about vintage sweaters without talking about ugly Christmas sweaters. Guys, it is getting kind of hard to find true ugly Christmas sweaters. And when I talk about that, I mean sweaters that are overly embellished from the 80s and 90s, because there's so many new replicas now. So although our Christmas sweater section is really expanding at my local thrifts, it's hard to actually pick out like the true vintage cheesy grandma sweaters that people are for real looking for. With vintage Christmas sweaters, again, people are looking for kind of like cutesy, like Santa and a kitten and stuff like that. People are really looking for like the more embellishments, the better. They really seem to like that. I do still think oversized is a good thing, although some people are going 100% all in and wearing these a little more snug fitting with like a turtleneck underneath them. Ugh. Perfect. So during the Christmas season, be sure to look out for some of these ugly Christmas sweaters because they can also sell for $20 to $30, which is pretty good when you think about how cheeseball these sweaters really are. As I was doing my research, I myself was actually pretty inspired to start modeling my sweaters. When I was looking through sold listings, I saw so many sold listings that actually had people modeling the sweaters. And like I said, it was usually a woman modeling like a men's medium or large sweater. So you do you and decide how you want to do that. But I actually think that I'm going to start modeling my sweaters more. I've talked a lot about vintage sweaters, referring to kind of knitted sweaters, but also sweatshirts can do really well as well, like crew neck, Fruit of the Loom, Hanes sweatshirts that people just straight up like glitter glued or put embellishments on are so amazing. I think I wore one in one of my recent videos. I love picking up stuff like that, and people do look for the crew neck sweatshirt style as well. For Christmas and vintage. I shouldn't say just for Christmas, because the crew neck sweatshirts can do really well, especially if they're for a particular like athletic team or college, or if they have some of that nostalgia, like 90s nostalgia that I'm going to talk about later. If they have like Tasmanian Devil on it, you're going to do really well with a piece like that. Finally, when it comes to picking up sweaters and sweatshirts, don't be afraid of a little bit of pilling. And that is when you just kind of see the wear by having the little fuzzies on the sweater. But don't be alarmed about that. You can very easily sweater shave those. I actually have a link in my description of my absolute favorite sweater shaver. It is a total workhorse and beast. It's a rechargeable sweater shaver, and you charge it once. It lasts a really long time. It's very simple to use, and I feel like it has done the best job compared to the other kind of cheaper battery powered models that I've had in the past to do the job and do it quickly, because sweater shaving, sometimes it takes a few passes before you can get the job done. But anyway, if you are interested in that, I have the link to what I use in the description below. It is an Amazon affiliate link, so I get a small kickback if you make that purchase. But like I said, I highly recommend it because it has like been a total game changer when picking up any kind of sweater, but specifically vintage sweaters. My next category is unique kids clothing, and I wanted to talk about that because I think it's often an overlooked area of vintage that can be really, really cool and profitable as well. I have two kids, and sometimes I just don't want to go to Target and Old Navy to get them clothing because every other kid at school is going to be wearing that same stuff that's available in our local area. So that's what's really fun about thrifting, not only to resell, but also for my family, is that you can find some really unique pieces. You can find some kind of older throwback pieces, and to see a kid wearing like a shirt from the 90s is just kind of, I don't know, startling and exciting and kind of cool to see. It's definitely a fashion statement. So I'll just quickly go over a couple things to look out for when it comes to vintage kids clothing. Overalls are pretty popular, especially vintage Oshkosh B'gosh overalls. Those are for boys and girls. There's the girls ones, the really floral designs can go for a lot of money. It's pretty wild. So be on the lookout for Oshkosh overalls for boys and girls. I think there are certain things that really determine the value, like maybe if made in USA. I don't know a lot about the Oshkosh specific brand, so if you do, please drop a comment below. But when looking up comps, I definitely saw a trend that Oshkosh was really up there. When I was looking up comps, I'll show it on the screen. I love these corduroy overalls. They are so cool. I've actually never run into anything like that, but I'm definitely going to be on the lookout. And what I'm seeing of items that are selling for more money in this kids vintage overalls realm are colorful pieces, and like I said, more unique pieces that their kids are going to stand out or will look great in family photos. Think about stuff like that when you are sourcing for vintage kids clothing. I've also been fortunate enough to pick up some kids sweatshirts and sweaters that have sold in the $20 to $30 range and up, which is pretty great for one piece of kids clothing. And it seems to circle back to the nostalgia that I talked about before. One item was a Muppets hoodie sweatshirt. It was so cool. I couldn't exactly tell what year it's from, but it definitely seemed kind of 80s to me. So I threw a few tags on there, and it ended up selling for a really good price point. When looking through comps, it did look like people are looking for similar things I talked about with vintage sweaters as well. These kind of abstract designs, vintage Christmas sweaters looked popular. So be on the lookout for pieces that you can tell are not from your standard Old Navy, H&M, Target, stuff like that. Vintage dresses, especially for babies and toddlers, can sell for a good price point as well. Definitely, again, we're looking for unique pieces. We're looking for things that kind of give that 60s, 70s boho vibe. Think of a unique piece that a little girl would be wearing in family photos. But I think pieces with that kind of throwback look, the embroidery, floral, kind of long flowy can be really cute. Definitely a 70s aesthetic looks to be trending right now with kids clothing. These pieces can be found in abundance during garage sale season, but also check your thrift stores because I think it is an overlooked department. There could be some really good gems there, and you could help fulfill a gap in the market. Okay, the next timeless vintage piece that I want to go over are mugs. It probably doesn't sound too glamorous. That's what I want to go over today. I want to go over timeless, accessible pieces that you yourself can actually source and flip on the internet for some profits. So anyway, mugs and vintage mugs. There are a few different ways to go about this. I have made a rule for myself not to pick up single mugs because I do feel from experience and looking at comps that sets usually do better. However, sometimes you can find that unicorn mug that can do really well on its own. So you do you, but that's my little disclaimer. Try to find sets if you can. So when I was looking up comps of vintage sold mugs and then thinking back on some that I've sold, I definitely noticed a trend on 60s and 70s kind of boho, browns, oranges, yellow tone mugs. So that was really interesting, although I'm not surprised at all. They definitely go with a certain aesthetic that people are decorating their homes with right now. What's really cool about picking up these mugs to resell is that they don't have to be name brand, they don't have to have special markings, although sometimes those do better, and they don't even have to be like a vintage Tweety-Bird mug. They can just have that classic cool look and vibe, and that's what people are wanting to decorate their homes with and use in their everyday lives. So I'll make sure I have some examples on the screen of some that I've sold or some that I saw in the comps. But like I said, the kind of 60s, 70s, sometimes psychedelic, but often a little more muted tones can do really well. I, in personal experience, have done well with kind of stoneware mugs, and those are the ones that are like kind of just a stone color, gray tone, and speckled. I don't know a lot about pottery, but I know that I've had good luck with those sort of mugs in my shop. Some specific pieces do well. Like for example, Hustle and Hooks just had a great video out where they were kind of going over their sales, and they highlighted a Tasmanian Devil mug that had an appearance in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And it was funny because I recognized that from my childhood, but we had the plastic version. When I looked up comps, that version might sell for 15 or 20, which is still pretty great for a single mug. But the Hustle and Hooks mug sold for like almost $200, and it was a very specific ceramic mug, Taz, and a certain year, like 1989, I think. And because it was that specific model that was in the movie, did exceptionally well, especially because I'm filming this in December 21 and they sold it around Christmas time. So I think it was kind of fresh on people's minds. I also saw some mugs that had mushrooms on them, and that is a very popular 70s aesthetic. So be on the lookout for mugs and other ceramic pieces that have mushrooms on them. And I saw some high comps for like celestial zodiac type mugs, which I'm not surprised at all. Like modern witchcraft is totally having a moment. So I'm not surprised at all that things with the moon and stars and zodiac symbols are popular and doing well as a single mug. So when you're at the thrift shop, make sure you look out for mugs, look for sets, look for kind of fall tones, autumn tones. Those seem to do really well. That's when people are drinking more coffee and hot tea, and that kind of puts out that 70s vibe. Look for things that are speckled ceramic stoneware mugs or like have floral attributes to them, because those can do really well as well. And if the mugs that you find do have markings on the bottom, be sure to look that up, because that could indicate that it could be worth even more money if it's a sought after maker. Other mugs I want to bring up are like Pyrex and Fire King, and those are kind of 60s and 70s mugs that people are still collecting and looking for. Sets always do well. People are trying to fill out their collections, so be on the lookout for the glass Pyrex, like the milk glass Pyrex, and also Fire King mugs. Okay, my final category is kind of a broad category. It's 90s nostalgia, and I love it so much because that is the time of my youth. I was born in 1987. Yes, you can math my age if you'd like, but yeah, so I grew up in the 90s, and I love that it's having a comeback. I love that younger kids are into it. I'm not against that at all, because I definitely remember when I was a kid trying on my mom's bell bottoms to wear to school. So hey, things are cyclical. They come back. Like I said, people are looking for nostalgic things that maybe they had growing up that are going to bring back warm, fuzzy feelings. And right now, that's kind of the 90s. So you saw that come into play when it came to the Levi's, when it came to the vintage sweaters and sweatshirts, even some of the mugs if you have like kind of vintage cartoon characters or TV promotional items. And you're gonna see that with a lot of categories. But when I wanna talk about 90s nostalgia, t-shirts do really, really well. So I definitely wanna make sure I gave that a highlight. If your t-shirt actually has a date, or if you can figure out its date by the t-shirt tag, you could do really well, especially with like Looney Tunes, like Garfield, Simpsons, any of those cartoons that were really out like in the 80s and 90s. If your t-shirt's marked with a date, can do super, super well. Some of them you can find by the fact that they are single stitch, but personally, I don't find a lot of single stitch t-shirts, and I think in the 90s, by the 90s, double stitch was definitely a thing. So I don't know, I'm no t-shirt expert. I'll include some comps as I talk about this too, to help you kind of really visualize what I'm talking about. Be sure to also look at toys and plush or stuffed animals, because vintage Looney Tunes, Garfield, Pokemon, stuff like that can do really well, especially, like I said, if it's actually dated to be from the 80s or 90s. People are really looking for the true vintage pieces, not kind of the modern remakes. So stuff that actually has a date is going to bring you a lot more value. I gave the shout out to Hustle and Hooks for the Taz mug because that was just an epic sale. In fact, I should probably just put that on the screen too, because like I said, that was awesome. So really you could look for really any promotional items that came out for like 90s Disney characters, Nickelodeon characters. If you are unfamiliar, a quick Google search and image search will show you a lot. Like it'll just immediately put the cartoons in your head for you to look out for when you're outsourcing. Vintage video game stuff falls into this category as well. I don't know if you've seen my recent video where I go over some sales $75 and up, but definitely check that one out because I talk about Nintendo Power Magazine. Now this is not 90s nostalgia, it's actually 80s nostalgia, but Oh, whatever, still counts. So in my previous video, I show a Nintendo Power magazine. It was the first edition that came out in, I think, 1985, if I remember right. And I sold that for I sold it for $200. Yeah, $202. And that was an auctioned item, and it was sold through the global shipping program that went to France, actually. I think that sale, the Taz mug, the other comps that I've shown on the screen will definitely make the case for 90s nostalgia and the value that it can have. So don't just write off, a Looney Tunes plushie, because it could be something that someone's looking for from their past. When people have emotional attachment to stuff, they're definitely willing to pay more for it, especially as those pieces get more and more rare. And believe it or not, y'all, the 90s is over 20 years ago, so some of those pieces are getting kind of rare. I myself actually just bought some Space Jam toys off eBay for my son. So I found one at a garage sale for like 25 cents. And he's obsessed with Space Jam. So then I'm like, I need more toys so he can like play with them together, right? So I went to eBay, just like other people go to my eBay store. I typed in Space Jam Michael Jordan and I found an action figure. Yes, I paid like 20 or 30 bucks for it, and I'm thrilled. I thought it was a deal, and it's gonna bring my kid a lot of joy this Christmas season. Okay, friends, there you have it. That is my list of 5 timeless vintage pieces to be on the lookout for when you are outsourcing, thrifting, garage selling, estate selling. Those are great places where you can find some of the things that I talked about today. I hope this information is useful to you and gets you excited to go out and find new types of items to list in your eBay store, Poshmark closet, wherever you like to resell. And more than anything, I want to encourage you to go check out the FI resellers, check out their videos, see what items they talk about. I bet they're going to talk about quilts. They are the quilt masters. So yeah, definitely go subscribe to their channel, check out their video, give them all the likes and comments and love, because they are really putting themselves out there as a part-time reseller, just like myself, to benefit us all. And they share a lot of great information on their channel. So I'm so grateful for them and this opportunity to do a collaboration and kind of be reminded of some things that I love looking out for, and to do new research on current comps, because learning is always the best thing ever. Thank you all so much. I hope that you have an awesome day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.